This is the Power Break Podcast number 311, titled The Wisdom in Managing Your Time. Hi, everyone. I'm Bob Brubaker, along with JT, as we hope you'll stay tuned as we seek to give you a little power in this break to help you succeed in the race of life.
This, the Power Break Podcast, with a focus on the spiritual, the mental, and the physical aspects, all to help you succeed in the race of life. For show notes from today's podcast, go to bobbrubaker.com and follow the link for the Power Break Podcast. So here we are, 311, and over more than 6 years we've been doing this podcast. I think we're kind of getting used to each other. I gotta tell you, you don't look a day older either from when we started, buddy. You look fantastic.
Well, anyway, welcome to the podcast, folks. We appreciate you listening. As we always say, thank you for listening. Thank you for telling others about the podcast. And also thank you for leaving ratings and reviews wherever you download the podcast. It really does help us.
Yeah, we always talk about the algorithms and all these cool things, but the truth is that the more popular a podcast is and the higher it's rated, the more it pops up for people's searches when it comes to different topics that they're searching for. So if you get on there, give us a 5-star, it'll make other people a lot more likely to find the podcast. And if you get something out of it, we should want to do that for other people, right, Bob?
That's right. Well, even though we don't have official sponsors, we like to always talk about Hammer Nutrition because, well, we like the Chainbreaker coffee. We like what they provide and all the kinds of nutrition for working out and other things. Good people at Hammer Nutrition, and they have a special family and friends discount for anybody that listens to this podcast and follows the link of hammernutrition.com/BOB710470. No, 71470. Okay. Let me try that again. But the best thing is the link is in the show notes at bobbrubaker.com.
That's right.
hammernutrition.com/BOB71470. That's it.
Yep. That was perfect, buddy. And I want to give a shout out to your wife, Jan. I just want to say, she always she'll send us or send me and Amy a text saying that she's praying for us, asking, what we would like her to pray for. And oddly enough, it's always timely. Usually it's at a point where I feel like, wow, I think I need prayer. And magically your wife, not magically, I know it's God, but she'll ask us if there's anything that she can pray about for us. So yeah, I just want to give a shout out. She's just, we talked in our last podcast about how important it is to have people in your life that you're doing life with, and that's part of your church. And you guys will always be a part of my church. So, yeah, that's my shout out.
Yeah, that woman's been special to me for over 50 years. We celebrated 50 years of marriage this year. So
that's amazing, buddy. I'm so proud of you guys.
As my old friend Stan Smith says, Bob, you married up. I sure did.
Well, that is the truth, but it's okay.
Yeah. Oh, JT, we're talking today about the wisdom in managing your time. I know it brings up a lot of things, but what comes up in your mind?
Once again, our topics are timely for me. It's summer break right now. It's coming to the end. Thank goodness. And I'm always trying to keep my boys busy. But the simple truth is they want nothing to do with time management because they're young and they feel like they have, an eternity, right? When you're young, you don't ever think about the fact that your time is limited here on this planet. So a lot of times I get frustrated because I feel like I'm sitting around waiting for them. So I feel like I'm not using my time wisely. But I think all of us who know God, who love God, feel like we have to make sure that we are accountable to Him with our time and that we're doing something that's furthering His kingdom as opposed to nothing towards His kingdom with our time, because our time is so limited here, and I know we're going to talk about this later, but I love when Christ talks about our worry and how we worry about tomorrow. And and how he talks about, today is your focus. You should focus on today, the time you have right here in front of you, because you don't know if there's going to be a tomorrow or not, but you know that you have today. So make the very best of it. And that's really what I get out of Scripture over and over again. So when I don't make the best of my time, it really weighs on me. So that's what kind of comes to my mind. How about you, buddy?
Well, I've become a student of time management a long time ago when I was first ordained in ministry. It has really been a part of my life. And I had I had some very dedicated guys at the one church I served, and they were young, and I got them a day timer and sent them up in principles about using a day timer, managing their time. And I've heard from a number of them that they still use that, and it really made an impact on their life.
It's awesome. Yep.
Especially when they went off to college. Well, time management will not ruin your life. It will enhance your life, that's for sure, and help you be a good steward of the days that God has given to you. 168 hours a week. How are you using that? Well, it takes discipline, as we all know. What God said, what the Lord Jesus Christ said, he said that if anyone will come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me. So today, we're talking about the wisdom in managing your time.
Yeah, before we head over to your blog and discuss your blog, I want to encourage people to get over to bobrubaker.com, and I want to encourage them to check out the resources. At the very least, sign up for the blog. It'll show up every Monday. Get you a nice head start as far as what we're going to be talking about on the podcast. But let's continue to talk more about the wisdom in managing your time.
Well, picture the life of a person who does not have a plan for managing their time. They're constantly responding to the tyranny of the urgent, so much so that at the end of the day, they're exhausted and wonder why they did not get the important things done that they thought was important, why they never have time to do what they really like. It's the life of a pinball, so to speak, in the old arcade pinball machine. Remember those, JT? Ding,
yeah,
ding,
I sure
ding,
do.
Ding, ding, ding. Okay. Well, the ball bounces around from one stop to the next, and the winner of the arcade game may have kept the ball bouncing longest, but it's no way to win the race of life. In order to win at the race of life, we need wisdom. It says in the book of Ephesians that look carefully how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is. A comparison passage is Colossians 4, verse 5 says, walk in wisdom toward outsiders, making the best use of time. Now, you'll notice how wisdom in the verses above are paired with one's walk, and in particular, on the use of time. And when you think about making the most of your 168 hours each week, it takes a plan in order to keep from acting unwise toward the allotted time that God has given you. 168 hours each week is God's gift to you, as in placing you in this 168 hours in your hands, for which you are a steward, and you will have to give account because stewards are required to be faithful. It says that in 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 2. It's required of stewards that they be found faithful. So, and then he says in 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 7, what do you have that you have not received? So, okay, if we've received it, it's a gift from God, and God has placed it in our hands and says, now, you're responsible. How are you going to use 168 hours in a week? More than likely, to be faithful in other things, you must be faithful in this. On the other hand, if you're unfaithful in handling your time, how can God trust you with other things? Luke chapter 16, verses 10 through 11 point that out. Well, handling of time is very serious. Unfortunately, very few people are taught the time management principles when they're young. Hence, instead of learning the value of time, they learn that time is spent in wasting, as in known killing time and thoughtless activities. The very devices that were developed to save time have become the greatest consumers of time as people thoughtlessly sit before a screen in non-productive activity from a very early age. And I guess, JT, you would say amen to that when you think.
Man, it is the constant battle in my life, is getting them away from screens, getting them away from, and the worst part is oftentimes that's how they socially interact with each other now, is through games. They're wearing a headset, they're talking to each other, they're actually building friendships. They're just not traditional friendships the way you and I look at them. Yeah. But man, it is such an incredible waste of time. Like, to me, I don't know, I've had to try to give it some value because I know that my boys, put value in it. So I try to look at it from their perspective, but it has to be limited. Like there was this great video. It's actually, are you familiar with TED Talks? What those are?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it was a TED Talk and it was about time, the time that you have on earth. And the assumption was, you were going to live to be 72. And then he broke down every single year, how many years you spent sleeping, how many years you spent at work, all these things. And so it already made it to where your extra time that you had, right, beyond living, right? Everybody's got to work, everybody's got to make money, that's part of this world. You got to do it. But if you took away all that stuff, you still only had like a finite amount of time. And then he factored in how much screen time the average person between the ages of 10 and 30 had a day. And it literally knocked it down to where you only had like 3 years to do anything. That's total time. It was crazy. Like both of my kids, their mouths dropped. Like, that can't be right. I'm like, yo, that's right. If you think about the math is spot on. So, yeah, screen time is a struggle, right?
Don't most phones or devices actually give you the amount of time you spend on that device every week?
Yes, there's a weekly report that many of us just dismiss when it pops up.
Yeah. Well, bottom line, it takes wisdom to come to the realization of the brevity of life, and that life that we have could be cut short by wasting it. Therefore, we need a plan to make sure that we make the most use of our time. And when we come to the end of our days and have nothing but regrets for the way that we've spent less than stellar stewards of our time. Well, so that's what he says in Psalm 90. The years of our life are 70, or if by reason of strength 80, yet their span is but toil and trouble. They're soon gone and fly away. Who considers the power of your anger and your wrath according to the fear of you? So teach us to number our days that we may get a heart of wisdom. I was really caught off guard when I first entered ministry and found myself just overwhelmed by all that was required of my time. I visited a pastor friend who seemed to have a good handle on managing his time and asked him his secret. He took out his day timer, ripped out the advertising page in the back, handed it to me and said, order this, and order the tapes. At that time it was tapes. That was 40 years ago, and it was the best advice I could have received because I became a student of time management and never stopped seeking to learn and grow in that area. It's a simple system of making sure that you keep a calendar of your activities, blocking off time for priorities, scheduling realistic times for events, including the work that has to be done, being diligent to keep your calendar current and prioritize. The second part, system of a to-do list. It's easy to add things to the to-do list, but it's harder to prioritize it, follow it, and then update for tomorrow's list to avoid walking away from things that are half completed. Well, whenever I taught on time management and laid it out, these principles, I have received a lot of negative feedback quite often as people balk at the system. They say it has no freedom, which is actually a complete misunderstanding. It's a misunderstanding first because it assumes that not having a plan is freedom. That's really a mistake because operating on the catch-as-catch-can system, responding to things as they come up, results in less productivity in the long run and prioritizes things that are not necessarily the best thing to do, but the loudest and may not have such high priority. There's a difference in those things to get done and are able to spend time with their family, and those who seem to be the busiest but rarely get home in time to be with their family have very little to show for their busyness. But it takes discipline to operate under a plan, to work the plan, to be diligent with the plan and priorities. Discipline leads to greater freedom, and results speak for themselves. In addition to the principle of discipline in one area of life, of course, as we always say, it leads to discipline in other areas too. Since Jesus taught the need for self-discipline in following him, since he inspired various writers in the Old and New Testaments to remind us of the brevity of life, and since he practiced time management principles himself, it only makes sense to awaken to the fact that we need to take heed and apply the wisdom of God to make the most use of our time.
Yep, I agree, man. I always think about in our generation, I think the big time management guru was Tony Robbins. You remember Tony Robbins? I think he's still around. Yeah. And one of the things that he talked about with time management was how it allowed you to be able to be effective in all aspects of your life, because what he found was there was always one part of your life that seemed to have the most emergencies and always required the most attention if you didn't have it scheduled out. So if you scheduled it out, you were able to keep it from interfering with all the other parts of your life, because all of us have work that we have to deal with. We all have our social lives with our kids, our wives, all those things. And if we don't schedule those out, I guarantee you one of them is going to start to hoard your time. So you got to make sure that you keep them all in their little place. And then it allows you to have more freedom, which is exactly the point you're trying to make. Exactly.
Well, check out the article, folks. It's the Wisdom in Managing Your Time. You'll find the article at BobBrubaker.com.
I bet I know which book we're going to talk about this week. What do you think?
I couldn't resist it,
I'm sure.
Talking about time management. The Power of Time Management, folks. Check it out at BobBrubaker.com. It's there for you to check out. Of course, just scroll through the resources to the books, and through the books you'll find The Power of Time Management, some of the principles that I always teach about, and you'll find it in a little booklet form. Also, check out the sermon links of the sermons I preach here at Christ Community Presbyterian Church in Clearwater, Florida, and the sermons I preached during the summer on the Psalms, as we go through the Psalms every summer from June through August. And this year we're going through Psalm 100 through 110. And you can find the links to those sermons at BobBrubaker.com.
This is the Power Break Podcast. I'm JT along with Bob Brubaker, and this is time on the podcast for questions and answers. If you have a question for me or for Bob, feel free to email me at BobBrubaker.com, actually at JT@BobBrubaker.com, and we'll get to answering that on an upcoming Power Break podcast. So what we're going to do next is we're going to go through the questions that we have about the different spiritual, mental, and physical sides of time management. So let's talk about, you said Jesus was very good with time management. Let's talk about that a little bit. How was he so focused with his time management, and how did you get that from reading Scripture?
Well, basic deductions, but consider a few points. First of all, Jesus was never in a hurry. No, he never was. Secondly, did Jesus know what he was going to do every day? Of course he did. Third, did Jesus have a plan for accomplishing what he was to do? Absolutely. And fourth, did Jesus come to the end of his life and have any regrets for leaving things undone? Absolutely not. So just those four aspects say Jesus knew what he was here for, what he was going to do. He said he came down from heaven not to do his own will, but the will of him who sent him. This is the Father's will who sent me, he said, that I should lose nothing but that he has given me, but raise it up the last day. Even when, he delayed going to the tomb of Lazarus to raise him from the dead, he was accused of a lot of things, but he knew exactly what he was doing, knew exactly the time, was not in a hurry, went there exactly when he should. He knew that before he called his apostles, that he spent time, an entire night in prayer, and he wasn't in a hurry. He knew exactly what he needed to do. And that tells us that if we want to, before we make important decisions, we schedule time to pray about it, right? So when we look at this, when he left Judea and he departed again for Galilee, that he said he had to pass through Samaria. Well, he knew what he was doing. He had to go there. And at that time in John chapter 4, we had him in the encounter with the woman at the well and presenting her the gospel.
That's right.
In John chapter 17, he comes down to the end of it and he says, I have glorified you on earth. He's praying to the Father. And I've accomplished the work that you've given me to do. In other words, he came to the end of his life. He had no regrets. Isn't that good?
Yeah, it's awesome. And something, I think those questions that you posed at the beginning to prove that Jesus practiced time management, those are questions we need to ask ourselves, right? And if we do that, I think we'll be far more likely to be effective in our time. We just always forget how finite our time is, right? And throughout Scripture, you're warned about that. And I think there's a lot of us that get to the end and think, wow, I could have done so much more with what I had.
Yeah.
And, I don't think any of us want to be in that position. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think those 4 questions, I'll just repeat them. Was Jesus ever in a hurry? No. Are we ever in a hurry? All the time, right?
All the time, yeah.
Did Jesus know what he was going to do every day? Yes. Do we know what we're going to do every day? Very few people do. Okay,
that's right.
It's kind of a pinball system. Did Jesus have a plan for accomplishing what he was going to do? Absolutely. Do we? Well, we don't if we don't practice time management. And the 4th question is, did Jesus come to the end of his life and have any regrets for leaving things undone? Absolutely not. But do many people come to that conclusion? I would say, yeah, they have a lot of regrets.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And that is something that I would encourage all of us to take seriously, because if you don't, if that's one of those things where you're like, I'll look at that tomorrow's never going to come. So you should definitely take the time, set aside time with your new time management skills, and think about ways that you can make sure that's not going to be the case.
Absolutely.
So question number 2 from the mental aspect, what is an appropriate mental strategy to make the most of our time?
Well, the first thing is, remember, it's a gift. 168 hours is laid in your lap every week, and God requires you to be a steward of all that he has given you, including your time. So when you take that bundle of 168 hours, okay, then you subtract the time that you sleep, okay, then, what else are you doing for that time? And by the way, as one old deacon said one time, that somebody said he thought the deacon was maybe too busy in the church. And he said, well, he put 168 hours, and he said, if I was going to tithe my time, that would be 16 hours.
There you go. Wow.
Anyway, good thought about that. Well, okay, so remember, time is a gift, and you're to be a steward of the time. Secondly, time is short, and procrastination is an assumption that you'll have tomorrow what you could do today, but don't assume anything. Treat every day with equal importance. How would you handle things today if you knew you didn't have tomorrow? And then thirdly, all areas of your life will benefit from being disciplined about your time, just as wasting your time will spill over into an undisciplined lifestyle in all areas, and you can just follow that line to see where that'll get you. So find a time management system. Look at it as freedom. I want the freedom, being able to do what I need to do in the time that I have and making the most use of time. And in doing that, you'll find you'll have even more time as you prioritize what is important.
Yeah, I think it's so important for us to look at that perspective of, what would you do today if you didn't have tomorrow, and take away all of the stuff that, would probably keep you from being effective, like, running around saying goodbye to every single human being. Obviously, you're not going to do that. But really look at it as, okay, how can I go to sleep knowing that I did what I needed to do, what I could do, and how I made other people's lives better? Going to bed knowing that is really a pretty cool thing. There was this song, it's by a country artist named Tim McGraw. I don't know if you know who he is or not, but Tim McGraw wrote a song. It's called "Live Like You Were Dying," and it was about his dad. How his dad, before he had the cancer diagnosis, was a very different human being, but afterwards, he was as Tim put in his song, he was a friend that a friend would like to have. And that's what he became. He found time to spend with the people he loved at the end. Well, wouldn't it have been cool if you didn't need that cancer diagnosis to be like that? Right?
Yeah.
But I think we're all guilty of just taking things for granted and assuming things. But anyway, so let's go into the physical side of life like we always do. It's hot. So what are the ideas that you have to beat the heat when working out? I'm a big proponent in always working out outside. I'm not talking about lifting weights, but I'm talking about cardio should always be outside, because I think there's a lot of benefits of your body being outside. It adjusts to temperature, your environment, all these things. But outside is hot, so how do we deal with it?
Well, I want to say appreciation to Steve Bourne, my friend at Hammer Nutrition, for placing 10 keys of beating the heat. First of all, he said to train in the heat. If you train half the time inside air conditioning, you'll find it harder to beat the heat. So if you're out in the heat all the time, you'll acclimate to that heat. But still, you need to do some things like stay hydrated all the time. Not just when you're working out, but hydrated all the time. And the third is to hydrate while working out in the heat. Make sure that you're properly hydrated. Fourth thing, he says, focus on electrolytes. Make sure you get a balance before, during, and after workouts. I'm really am pushing this. I've been trying these tablets that I put into my post-workout drink that are actually hydrogen. And it's supposed to encourage your body to hold on to more onto water longer and make use of it better. Anyway, I'm just experimenting with that. I think it's working out pretty good. Steve also recommends avoiding sugar-based drinks while working out,
yes,
and especially after workout, because that will lead to dehydration. Good point, Steve. I also said to use an electrolyte drink prior to working out in the heat. That's a good idea. Pace yourself in your workouts in the heat. You may have to back down on the intensity. Use caffeine cautiously, because that will dehydrate you. And also get wet often. I like that. Did you notice that when you watch the Tour de France, how many times? I mean, people were grabbing water bottles from that. Like the neutral service would hand out water bottles to the breakaway group, and they would grab that red water bottle, and the first thing they do is dump it on themselves, and they toss the bottle.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because are they colored different if they're water as opposed to like an electrolyte drink? Or
well, the electrolyte drink the electrolyte drink would come from the team car, and they would have some kind of designation on those. But the neutral car, it was just water. And most of the things that are handed out by the team cars are water, although they make sure that they get enough electrolytes. But yeah, when they get a red bottle, that's just water. That's from a neutral.
Yeah, it just made me think about when Mark Cavendish, I think it was day one when he really suffered, suffered. And that's basically, there was one guy who was assigned just to dump water on his neck. It was so hard. But yeah, it's a great point. If you can actually make it to where your body can stay cool, even if it only is cool for a couple of minutes, it makes a huge difference.
Oh, yeah, just dousing yourself with water. Anyway, the 10th thing that Steve says, know the symptoms of dehydration and overhydration, and stop. Don't race further, or don't work out if you're going into dehydration or even overhydration, because that can wreck your health. Good points from Steve Bourne. What say you, JT? Anything else?
Yeah, I mean, interestingly enough, when I was an instructor at SWAT school, I would always, whenever anybody asked me any advice, I would always say, make sure all your cardio before you go to SWAT school is outside. Do not be on a treadmill. Do not be inside in the air conditioning. Make sure everything's outside. And the reason why was I found direct correlation with the people who had to wash out, because usually SWAT school was, well, number one, it's Florida, so it's always hot outside. But number two, a lot of times it was in the summer, right? So these people would get out there and they weren't used to, running or just being in the heat for 10, 12 hours a day. And they were done. They would dehydrate quickly. Their body wasn't able to deal with it. But the guys who made sure, and the gals who made sure that they worked out outside prior to SWAT school were just fine. Their body had acclimatized to it, and there was no issue.
Yeah. I think both I don't know about you when you played high school and college football, but high school especially, they were making changes when I went to college. But for the longest time in football practice, it was it was a badge of honor if you could go the whole practice without needing a drink.
Yeah, it used to be like that. You're
what
absolutely
are you talking about?
right.
And they even did that in games. Like, you don't need water. You're really a man. But, yeah, that's the dumbest thing you could ever do.
That's why we all got hurt.
We need that. So I was glad when I went to college. They would take breaks several times during practice for a water break. Yeah. Anyway, the point is it takes discipline to apply a common sense approach to not only working out, but also making sure that you're hydrated and preparing to work out in the heat. It'll help you to make greater gains in the long run. Discipline does make the difference in all aspects of life. Well, so check out today's show notes at bobbrubaker.com. Click on the Power Break podcast. Today's show number 311.
And submit your questions by email to jt@bobbrubaker.com and listen for our answer on an upcoming Power Break podcast.
Check out the book, The Power of Time Management, when you go to bobbrubaker.com.
Well, thank you for joining us for the Power Break Podcast. Please subscribe and leave a review wherever you've downloaded the podcast, and check out show notes, news, Bob's weekly blog, and other cool things at bobbrubaker.com. And listen next week for the Power Break Podcast.